So I got a story for you. See how this goes. So I grew up in this dark, gray, oily little industrial town, Clinton, Massachusetts. And every year, springtime, the carnival would come to town and set up in the empty field next to Iandoli's supermarket and Grant's department store. I should say set up in the muddy field next to Iandoli's and Grant's. Because every year, like clockwork, 24 to 48 hours before the carnival came to town, there was a torrential downpour. So what we ended up with was cables buried foot deep in mud, and corrugated cardboard pathways between the merry mixer, the bumper cars, and the rig-to-screw-you skill games. You know what I'm talking about, right? Year after year, they came back with the same stuff over and over and over again. Until one year, they arrived with something new. A video game tent. Now, my buddy Danny and I, we were welfare kids. We didn't have a lot of money, and we had no arcade. If we wanted to play video games, we needed to get on a bus and go to Worcester. Yes, it's Worcester. Excuse me, it's Worcester, Massachusetts. We needed to go to Worcester. We couldn't afford that bus most of the time. We didn't have that many quarters for games. We had no chance to play these games. So we walk into this tent, and immediately we were embraced by the warm glow of all those video screens. This was home. And we looked around, and we saw kids firing missiles, woo! And kids landing helicopters, and kids taking tight turns on the speedway. But right in the center of that tent, there was one game we couldn't see because there were so many kids crammed around it. So we pushed in and we jostled and we pushed and we jostled. We got up to the front and we craned our necks and we saw the name, Space Wars. And we looked down at the screen. And there were two ships on the screen. The first ship was shaped like the Starship Enterprise. Now that's cool. The second ship was just a triangle in space. And we decided it looked just like a Star Destroyer. Because, yeah, we read a lot of science fiction. Okay, so we're watching these ships, right? We're watching these ships. And one of the guys, he pushes the hyperspace button, and the ship disappears in one spot and reappears in another spot. Boop! Just like in a real space battle. And we're watching these guys play, and the one guy fires a plasma ball, boom, 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 and just glances the other ship. And it doesn't just disappear off screen, no. It takes a glancing blow, and little fragments fly off into space, just like in a real space battle. And the most amazing thing about this game was, there was no computer opponent. You had to have two people, two human beings to play this game, just like in a real space battle. Now, we waited and we finally got to play the game, but we ran out of quarters really fast. And we were left standing there, a couple of poor welfare kids. I mean, quarters were hard to come by. They weren't just lying on dressers waiting to be stolen. So what were we going to do? Spent the rest of the day wandering the Midway trying to figure out some way to scam some more quarters. And as luck would have it, we ran into this dirty, skeezy, smelly carny in filthy dickies who was paying young boys in quarters to sit on his lap. Now, I'm no fool. I knew why he was paying kids to sit in his lap. But hell, free quarters! Space Wars! More Space Wars! Now, Danny, he was skeezed out by this. He took off back to the video game tent. Me, I sat down and I got my quarters, and I came back to the tent and I met him there, and we played a little more Space Wars and we ran out of quarters. Now, every day this turned into our routine. We would get to the carnival. He'd go to the video game tent. I'd find this skeezy carny. I'd sit down, I'd get my quarters, we'd play a little Space Wars. Awesome. Until the last day of the carnival. We arrived, and before I could look for this carny, he found me, tapped me on the shoulder. And he said, "Hey, can you help me with something? It's worth 4 rolls of quarters." 4 rolls of quarters. We could play Space Wars until I packed up the Carnival and moved out of town. So Danny took off, and I followed this guy. Back behind Iandoli's supermarket, back into the woods behind Iandoli's, deep into the woods behind Iandoli's, until we came to this little clearing, and this big old rock. And he sat down on the rock, and he took out those 4 rolls of quarters, and he put them on the rock next to him. And he unzipped his pants, and he took it out. And I looked in his eyes, and I saw shame, self-hatred, and desire. And he grabbed my wrist, and he started pulling me toward it. And just before my fingertips touched flesh, I said, "This is what my stepfather used to make me do." And he dropped my wrist. And I looked into his eyes, and the desire bled away. He reached down and zipped himself up real fast. He took those rolls of quarters and he crammed them into my palm. And he looked at me, and in those eyes all I saw was ice-cold fear. And he said, "Please, please, please don't tell anybody." And I never did. Until now.